Hey everybody, Doug Gooden back here to do another mini-sode for Cross to Crown Ministries. And this time I want you to know this really will be a mini-sode. I got a little mockery from, and well-deserved mockery from my own family as well as some others for a mini-sode that ended up being almost as long as a normal podcast. But not today. Today I'm going to keep it relatively short. So if you listened to the last one and you've implemented it, then I'm sure that you are working out and you're getting strong, you're lifting heavy weights, and that's good. Keep going with that. But today I want to talk about the command that we have as men, especially as males, the call we have to rule. We have looked at this before, but just as a way of refresher, in Genesis chapter 1, mankind is created and we are told to rule and to subdue the earth. That's what we are to do as men, as human beings. That's part of acting out the image of God. Remember, two things we were told to do: reproduce and rule. And we're talking primarily today and in these short episodes on the ruling part as men. That's why last time we talked about strength, because we need to be strong and courageous as men. Today I want to talk more about the essential element of ruling, and that is simply this. What do rulers do? Rulers make decisions. That really is it. That's the heart of what it means to be in a position of rulership. Make decisions. Decide. When a question is put before you, when a decision is to be made, if you have the right authority, if it's something under your jurisdiction, so to speak, as a ruler, then you make a decision. You rule. You decide. It's that simple. Seems to me like we men today are very hesitant to make decisions. But we're called upon to make decisions all the time. I jotted down just a few from this past week, and these are simple. These are everyday kinds of decisions. They particularly have to do with me as a ruler in my home. I'm the head of my household, the head of my home, and I have to make decisions. And so the principle here applies to every arena over which you are a ruler. But I want to talk today just about some things in my household to kind of give an idea of what kinds of things we need to make decisions in, and have you think through, where are you hesitant to make a decision and why? So here are a few things. So my girls, my daughters have been away all summer serving at a camp, Eagle Lake on location and Eagle Lake Camp. And so Monday was the first day that we were all together again as a family. And it was a great day. I had been away last week teaching at the Loreauville Conference in Loreauville, Pennsylvania, and it was a wonderful time. We've been gone for 4 days. And by the way, there was several decisions that had to be made leading up to that. One was whether or not to leave my 14-year-old son here at home by himself, because my daughters would not get back until Friday and Sunday respectively. And so that's a decision that has to be made, and that is a decision that fell to me as the head of the home. It's not a decision I could put off on my wife. It's not a decision that I wanted to leave in the hands of my 14-year-old exclusively, but that's on me. And I decided that my son was mature enough to handle it, and so we left him here on his own. He stayed here Friday night, and then my daughter got back, he stayed Thursday night rather. My daughter got back Friday, and then we all got back Sunday night. My oldest daughter joined us Monday morning, and so Monday, it was the first time in 13 weeks that we'd all been together as a family. So one of the decisions I made was that we would have family dinner together that evening at 6 o'clock. Something as simple as this is a decision to be made. But when, it's actually my wife's idea, she said, hey, could we have our meal together on Monday night? And I said, yes. And she said, what time would you like to eat? Now, it's very tempting as a husband to say, oh, I don't care. But what happens when you simply say, I don't care, when someone under your authority asks you a question like that? You're giving up the throne. You're deferring to someone else on the decision that she's seeking from you. Now, there is a place for delegation, and somewhere down the road, maybe we'll talk about delegation. There are certainly things I have delegated to my wife and even to my children they don't need to come ask me about. But when it's a decision for me to make, and when my wife asks me, what time would you like dinner? I shouldn't hem and haw. I shouldn't hesitate. I shouldn't put it back on her, say, I don't care. Have an opinion. If you're a ruler, which you are, men, have an opinion. So I very quickly said 6 o'clock. So that was the decision. Another decision I made is, what are we going to talk about? What are we going to do during this meal? It was my prerogative, my right as the ruler to bring the questions that we would discuss. And of course, we naturally spent a lot of time hearing about everybody's summer since we'd been apart. And that was intentional on my part. In fact, I came with a couple of specific questions that I wanted us to discuss, and specific questions about the summer, what the Lord was doing, and what they had learned about themselves and about others and the Lord, those kind of things. So that was on me as the head of the home to make sure that we interacted with those questions. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not an austere occasion. It's not like my family sits around waiting to talk until they are called upon. It's not that kind of feel at all. In fact, sometimes I wish it were a little more like that, because sometimes the squirrels take over, if you know what I mean, and we start down this path, and then we end up chasing all kinds of squirrels, and I have to keep calling us back to the question that I want us to discuss. So I don't rule with an iron fist, and you know, it's not a tense, awkward environment when we have these conversations. But the point is, as the ruler, I have an objective I'm trying to accomplish in that meal, and I bring those questions, and I draw out from my family the conversation that I want to have. So that was a decision I made. We're going to eat at 6 o'clock, and we're going to talk about these things. After we got done eating, it was just a beautiful evening, and I decided we're going to go for a long walk. So we, as a family, went for a walk, and it was a good long walk. We were 2 miles or so down this path along a creek here near our home, and we just talked, and the girls ended up walking kind of behind and talking amongst themselves. My wife and I and my son were up a little front, but of course there was lots of back and forth conversation. So we got to the place where we were going to turn around, and across the creek is this, I'm not even sure how to describe it, but it's a man-made water storm sewer kind of thing, but it's exposed to the open. I don't know exactly how to describe it, so just go with me this far. It's pretty steep, and it has lots of concrete, almost like steps if you were a giant. You know, if you were 50 feet tall, these would be steps your size. So anyway, my son and my daughter decided to go over and climb up this thing, and they had to cross the creek to get there. And as they made it to the other side, there was some very, very slick places where the water kept coming down, and where I guess some algae had grown up. So my son, and I wasn't watching, so I don't know exactly how this came about, but he ended up sliding out of control a long ways down and crashed into one of these big concrete barriers, and hurt his foot pretty badly. He was certain it was broken. So they're across this pretty good-sized creek, just him and my daughter, and he is thinking he has a broken foot. So now there are decisions to be made, and my daughter is pretty strong, and she really wanted to help him get across on her own, so I had a decision to make. Am I going to go get him? Am I going to tell him he's got to make it on his own? And after looking at him try to get up, I realized there's no way he's walking on that foot. Or do I let her bring him across? And so I decided to let her try at least to bring him across, and I was keeping an eye out, thinking if she can't handle it, then I will take off my shoes and I'll cross over the creek as well and carry him back, I guess. Didn't take long to realize it was going to be very slow going. She was perfectly capable of helping him, but it was pretty rough, and there was a fairly strong current for a creek that they had to come across, and I realized there's no way he's walking home. So I told my wife and my oldest daughter to walk back home, the 2 miles back to our place, and to bring the car to a place. If we kept going down the trail we were on, there would be a cross street not too far away, about a half mile, maybe 3/4, where it'd be obviously quicker for us to get my son to that cross section and get him in the van than it would to walk all the way back the way we had come. So I sent my wife and my daughter together back up the path, back home, to get the van to meet us at this cross street. And after some slow, painstaking effort, my daughter was able to get my son most of the way, and I went down finally and helped him the rest of the way. So now I picked him up, put him on my back, and carried him the half mile or so it is to this cross section, to this cross street. Well, at least we started down that journey. And by the way, if I had not been working out recently, it would have been way harder to carry my son on my back at this point, because he was just done. His foot really hurt. It was difficult for him to put any weight on. Well, he couldn't put any weight on that one, and hopping on the one foot just was painful. So I physically carried him, and that's one of the reasons it's good to be strong and to keep getting stronger. So we made it down the path quite a ways, and I realized there's a better way. So I called my wife and I told her to let me know when she got to that cross street, and then I went up there and I drove the van down this path. Now it's just wide enough for a vehicle to get down, but vehicles are not allowed there. But that was a decision that I made, that I'm going to break the law, so to speak, to go get my son rather than try to carry him back. That was a decision. That was my call. So then we got in the van and I backed out the quarter of a mile to the street. And now another decision to be made. Do we take him to the emergency room? Do we take him to the urgent care? Do we wait and see how it is tomorrow? He's convinced it's broken. It certainly was swollen, and it hurt a lot, but we weren't convinced it was broken. And this was evening. This is 8:30 p.m., almost 9 o'clock by now. So the decision is mine to decide, am I going to take care of this medically tonight or wait and see? And I talked it over with my wife. I got her input, but I didn't want the decision to rest on her because I'm the head of the home. And so I decided we're going to wait and see how it is tomorrow. Assuming that my son can get some ibuprofen in him and sleep, then I think we'll be fine to wait till the next morning. And sure enough, the next morning it was certainly hurting and swollen, but we decided it wasn't broken. He had some movement, looked like a bad sprain, and so I decided that we would not take him to the doctor. Let's give it another day or two to heal up. And it is getting some better, and I think the swelling has gone down, so we probably won't take him to the doctor. That's my call. That's on me to decide those things as the ruler, as the head of the home. And I made those decisions. Certainly it impacted others. It impacted my son. If his foot was broken and there was a downside to not take him to the doctor, then I would have to suffer the poor decision if it was to his detriment for me not to take him to the doctor. On the other hand, I'm responsible for our finances. Is it a good use of our money to go to a doctor if we don't really need to? I've got my wife, feeling sorry for my son, feeling badly for him, and I don't want her to be afraid of what may or may not happen. All of those things I take in consideration, but at the end of the day, it's my decision. I'm the ruler. Well, if you're married, you have a household, you at least have a wife, and if you have kids, you're the head of that household. And this is just one example. We have work responsibilities and neighborhood responsibilities and church responsibilities. If you are a man, you are a ruler, and you've been given rulership. You've been given the authority to make decisions in a variety of places and ways, and it's on you to make those decisions, to decide. And if your response is, I don't know, what do you think? Oh, let me think about it. If your immediate response is, I'm not going to make a decision here and now, the question is why? Or if you're afraid to actually say the words, yes, we're doing this, no, we're not doing that, the question is why? Now, to be sure, there is a time and a place to hold off on a decision, to gather more information, to pray about things, to seek with wise counsel, of course, and especially the bigger the decision, the more care needs to be given into the making the decision. However, so often it's not because we're going to pray about it. It's not because we don't have all the information. It's because we just won't decide as rulers, as kings. And that makes for pathetic kings. Kings who won't rule, kings who won't make a decision. Why is it that we struggle with this? Think about it just in your own mind for a moment. If your instant response when a decision is brought to you, a decision to be made is brought to you, if your initial response is to hesitate, to withhold the decision. The question is why? I think there are probably three major reasons why we are hesitant to make decisions. Number one, we are afraid to fail. That plagues us as men. We are afraid to fail for a variety of reasons, especially if you grew up in a home where your father or other parental figure, whether it was your mom or a grandfather or someone else who had some weight in your mind, some influence on you, if you were shamed for failure, if you were ridiculed, if there were significant consequences to failure, then you quickly learn, all right, I can avoid that shame. I can avoid that response if I just don't fail. And one way to fail is to not do anything, to not make any decisions, to not provoke someone to respond that way. If that's your situation, you've got to get past that. You've got to get over that. You've got to be willing to fail. If you're not failing at anything, you're not making any decisions. Let me say that again. If you're not failing at anything, you're not doing anything, you're not making any decisions. I make decisions all the time, and some of them are not great decisions. What do you do next? You make another decision. That's what leaders do. That's what rulers do. And you can't be afraid of failing, because you might as well just accept it. You will fail. You will blow it. You will make decisions that you'll later regret. And certainly we want to learn from those, but at the end of the day, that should not keep you from making another decision. If you have the authority to rule, then you need to rule. In our household, I encourage failure. I want my children to do something and then to fail at it. That is an indication that they're actually going somewhere and trying new things. And especially whenever they are given the responsibility over anything to make a decision, I want them to make it freely, and I encourage them. And I don't shame them when they make a poor one. We learn from it and we move on. You need to get there, and you can. Even if this is not your background, even if you didn't have encouraging parents in this sense, you can trust the Lord and trust His grace and His mercy, that He will forgive you when you make bad decisions, and He will help you learn from it and make better ones in the future. But the bottom line is, if you are in the role of ruler, and as a man you're in that role in some areas, you have to rule. And that means you have to make decisions. Those under your care are waiting for you to make decisions. The second reason that I think that we hesitate to make decisions as men is for the fear of being called authoritarian. We're afraid that someone's going to say we're domineering, that we're harsh, that we're overbearing, those kind of things. Our culture has resisted the authority of Jesus Christ. And as a result of that, they push back against any authority. And we see it in politics all the time. We see it in other areas. Anybody who actually exercises authority, especially in a democracy, everyone assumes that they have the right to buck that authority, because we don't see that our democracy or republic, as it really is, that there's any real authority there. And people are taught to push against authority, to rebel. You know, the revolutions of the 60s continue as the second and third generations are bearing the impact of those revolutions, of throwing off authority and saying, I'm going to do whatever I want to. Well, that plays into the church, that plays into our own thinking, and all you have to do to cause someone to withhold exercising their rule is to label them authoritarian or domineering, those kinds of things. And so we are afraid of that sometimes. As husbands, we're afraid of that. I hear this from wives fairly often. They will say things like, I know that I'm supposed to submit to my husband and that he is the head of the home, but it's the way he exercises his headship. It's the process. It's I don't feel like he cares about my input. Now, certainly there are men who abuse their authority and who are too dominant. They are domineering. They are authoritarian over their wives and their children. And that's not good. That doesn't represent Christ well. But just because somebody, even your wife, just because somebody under your authority says that you're doing it too harshly, that doesn't mean you actually are. Our natural instinct, whenever we are in submission to an authority and we don't like their decisions, our natural instinct is to to rebel, and it's excusable, it's justifiable in our own mind at least, to say, oh, well, yes, they're the authority, but I just wish they would do it differently. They don't act like they love me or care for me very much. They don't care about my opinion. So the point is, just because someone says you're authoritarian does not mean that you actually are being authoritarian. The only opinion that should matter to you is the Lord Jesus. The Lord Jesus, he has authority over all of creation, right? Heaven and earth, it's all under his authority. He is not hesitant to issue commands and directives. He is not hesitant to say what he wants his followers to do. Do we receive him as authoritarian? You and I as believers don't. We want to please him. We want to know what he expects from us. We want to know his commands so we can show that we love him. That's what he said. If you love me, you'll keep my commandments. Well, those under your rulership should have the same response as well, and whether or not they act like it is not your primary concern. Your first concern is, am I ruling with the authority Christ has given me? Put it this way, if Jesus has given you authority over your wife, over your kids, over this segment of your business or your job or church or whatever positions of authority you've been put in, you have his authority to exercise that rulership. Remember, Paul said all authority that exists is given by God himself. And for us not to exercise the rulership we've been given by Jesus is arrogant and our own rebellion. We're failing to do what we have been commanded to do. So don't be afraid of people calling you authoritarian and domineering. Don't be those things, but it's Jesus. He's the one who should decide whether you're being authoritarian or not those under your leadership. They won't like it all the time. They won't react well all the time. We're afraid of people not liking us. That's part of this fear. We want to be liked. We want people to think we're nice and kind and gentle. Imagine how much different Jesus' reigning and ruling would be if he was concerned about being nice and gentle. Now, he does care and he does love us, but that does not keep him from being the king and exercising his authority, and we should be rulers like him. So don't be afraid of how others will respond to you. Lead, rule, do what you've been called to do. The third reason why I think we hesitate to exercise rule as men is we don't have a clear view of what we're trying to accomplish. We don't have a clear view of our mission. As a husband, I'm called to take my wife somewhere. As a father, I'm called to take my household somewhere. As a man, I was put in a garden. Going back to the Genesis 2 idea, Adam was put in the garden and God said, rule over it and subdue it and cultivate it, protect it. You and I as men have been given gardens. We've been given areas of God's world over which we are supposed to rule. We're supposed to subdue it and cultivate it and protect it. But we men today don't usually have a clear grasp, a clear view of what it is we're trying to accomplish. And so we think, well, what's the point of ruling? I don't know, my kingdom, what does it mean to rule my kingdom, to rule my household, to be the king of my castle? I don't even know what we're trying to do. We get so comfortable having a nice family, a nice marriage, nice kids, nice job, go to a nice church, and everything's just nice. And we just are trying to get along in this nice world until Jesus comes back. No. He says, I want you to make a difference in my world and in the kingdom, and I want you to rule and take your family, your household, whatever, and accomplish the mission I've given you. Now that's a much bigger topic, and we're going to talk about that at a future time. But for now, for today, gentlemen, kings, I would encourage you to do some self-reflection and ask yourself, am I afraid to fail in my kingship? Am I afraid of being told that I'm authoritarian and that people won't like me? And is that causing me not to rule well? And do I have a view of my mission, the mission that Jesus has put me on in this world? Reflect on that, give some thought to that. And here's my practical application for you. Make decisions. Today, the rest of this day, there are going to be things that you need to decide on as a man. And tomorrow you're going to wake up and you're going to have decisions that you need to make as a man. That's part of your calling, part of your responsibility as a male. Make decisions. Don't be afraid. Just do it and get yourself in the habit of ruling well by making decisions. God bless, and we'll talk to you next time.